Hey there. Hope all's well. Want to share my thoughts on Jerome Powell's decision or the FOMC's decision to take a backwards turn towards their normalization of rates, supposedly, to actually, as they said, in somewhat of insurance, getting ahead of the curve or the catastrophe that's underway more so. But anyway, so with a quarter point drop in the interest rate yesterday, it made headline news everywhere. And so, of course, the central bank, Federal Reserve, being the biggest bank, the leading bank around the world because of its reserve currency status, it's very important news because once again, but when was the last time interest rates were actually dropped? I believe it was due to the great financial recession, great financial crash, whatever we want to call it. And so the fact that they are backpedaling now on their own policies, and especially after having watched the Q&A session after Jerome Powell delivered his prepared speech, it let me know more so that these people are truly playing it by whim. Throwing it up in the air and seeing where it lands and seeing how they can keep themselves in position a little bit longer as this thing unfolds. But one thing I want to shine some light on is I'll actually put the link below, but this current month has been a very busy month for a lot of central banks. Not only has the Federal Reserve decided to cut as of total, I think I got in front of me here about 7 central banks around the world have also been cutting their interest rates. And due to the fact that a lot of nations are feeling that economic crunch, economic pinch. And so once again, typical indicators would be recessionary issues, such as a couple things that Jerome Powell mentioned about manufacturing slowing down. And there's a variety of other indicators, of course, the yield curve and things of that nature. And so actually, if you want a better understanding of all the indicators that are pretty important, worthy of noting about, take a look at the previous video I did with David Haggith, who laid out 10 indicators that lets him know that the recession is right now. And so definitely one thing that I took away from yesterday's rate cut is that if typically rates are dropped in a recession, then that lets me know that we truly are in a recession, that they decided to cut a quarter point yesterday. But as I mentioned, also 7 other banks. So I'll call off briefly, but definitely take a look below this video at the article. But just looking in front of me now, they're out of the 7 banks, the deepest drop in interest rates happened to be from the Turkish bank. And so they went from 24% down to 19.75. So a full 4.25 point drop as of last week. Of course, mainstream news, you hear nothing about that, but yet everyone in alternative media news know that Turkey's having issues and their currency is suffering heavily because of it as well. Actually, yesterday, the same time Jerome Powell was probably giving a speech, looks like Brazil dropped from 6.5% down to 6. So they dropped a whole half a point themselves. And then every other nation on the list are all nations that are things that you definitely wouldn't hear about unless you lived in those countries. But yet, even still, when you have 7 central banks in the same month decide to drop, as well as on this list here, there's a total of about 20 or so banks that have all dropped relatively in the last year or so. That lets me know that not only from a global standpoint, things are slowing down, but yet internally in a lot of these countries here, they're all experiencing economic issues where they're forced to try to keep their economies or prop their economies up by incentivizing debt, by dropping interest rates. And so definitely lets me know that right now the recession is now. I've never been more convinced as opposed to what I'm seeing right now with the fact that they are dropping rates without there actually been a recession according to their own measurements, but yet to get ahead of the recession, to keep this expansion going, as Jerome Powell mentioned, they decided to drop rates. So definitely I wanted to bring this article to you guys' attention because definitely, once you have the primary central bank dropping rates, and then we got the ECB talking about dropping rates in September, along with starting some more easing. That lets me know that things are really coming apart at the seams, and so it's just a matter of time before, this next interest rate hike. I'm actually reading an article by Zero Hedge now about Goldman Sachs. Basically, they're preparing for the idea that I think it says a 50% chance or so that in September there'll be another rate cut, give or take. So here you go. They're dropping rates. We're not in a recession according to them. So what are we in? Is this just an economic slowdown or what? So this is becoming a very problematic environment we're in, my friends. And so definitely wanted to share this article here because central bank Federal Reserve yesterday was not the only bank. There's other banks that's doing the same thing. So if everybody's dropping, it looks like there's literally a race to the bottom. Every central bank, to keep their economies alive and to keep this current monetary debt-based system in existence, everyone needs to drop. Therefore, this whole currency situation will be very problematic as people continue to save and do practical financial dealings while central banks are doing unprecedented monetary policy and borderline radical policies at this current point. So other than that, definitely take a look at this article beneath this video here and just see all the other central banks that are also dropping. And the question is, how many more banks on this list here will also be dropping before the year is over with? And think about within those countries, the citizens that hold those papers where once again, the people who will benefit most from the drops of these interest rates won't be your average 9-to-5 person who's working to save as opposed to working to utilize this debt-based model to their advantage. So other than that, hope all's well. Let me know your thoughts below. How many more rate cuts do you see coming? 1, 2, 3? So we'll see, but curious to find out what you think. See you later.